Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited because I've never really reached out to a solutions architect before. And you also really wanted to be on this podcast as well. So I'm very excited for that. So thank you so much for being here. I guess like the first thing I would want to ask you is, can you provide a short introduction about yourself, your background, your interests or hobbies?
Yeah, absolutely. I am currently a solutions architect, and my work mostly consists of UX design and business process strategies, as well as technology and solutioning on the ServiceNow platform. I'm very creative, so I try to engage in creative activities, and I really love dogs.
Do you have a dog of your own?
I do. I have a little baby. He's very
Aww.
small. It's a 5-pound Chihuahua.
All right. So if you had all the time in the world, what would you be doing?
Normally, I probably would answer traveling. I used to love to travel, and I lived in over 4 continents actually.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, since we can't travel anymore as much, I guess going back to the dogs thing, I really love animals, so I would hope to one day have the means and the time to be able to aid animals and help rescuing them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Have you considered fostering dogs right now? So like kind of
I have. I actually have fostered two dogs. I have fostered two dogs in the past. Yeah, it's hard because then you get very used to them, and then you have to let them go. It's kind of like consulting. You get very used to your projects, and then you have to let them go.
Yeah. I fostered 2 cats, and I kept my second cat. So you can see how that went.
It's funny. Most people say that they're like a cat or a dog person, but I really like both. So I grew up with cats and dogs.
All right. So what are your aspirations in life?
Certainly keep working on exciting projects and exciting initiatives. I've worked with so many high visibility companies, and I want to really keep on doing that. For me, it's very fulfilling whenever I can make an impact and see that I left a company in a better spot than when I started. So that really, gets me up in the morning. But then also in terms of making an impact, I certainly like to help people that are beginning their careers, especially women, and really advocate for that and show that, anything is possible, even if you're coming, from a fashion modeling background, or if you're coming from a background where you didn't really have the opportunity to go to university. But as long as you have the grit and the ability and the want to really understand and are able to expose yourself and get the most experience as possible, I think you can do it.
Okay. So you did mention you wanted to do a lot of exciting projects. So trying to throw it out there, if you had to choose all the projects out there, all the clients in the world, what would you want to do?
I want all of them. No, I've worked with so many exciting companies. I've worked with Disney, with Apple, I've worked with Major League Baseball, and I just love seeing how business operate and help businesses grow. It's just a passion of mine, and using technology for that. I mean, that's just, amazing. So for me, I think the answer would be working with someone where I have the opportunity to really make a big impact.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can feel that because when I work with a lot of these clients, even though the ones that I work with is mostly the finance accounting teams, it's really interesting to see how they do their finances behind the scenes. Like a lot, like for example, WWF, that was like a client I worked on, and I was like, ooh, save the pandas, like a lot of plushies and everything. But when you see behind the scenes of what goes down, I was like, wow, I'm pretty blown away of all the things that goes behind. And then the fact that like I worked on a software that they're going to be used for decades, I'm like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, and the impact that you're making, sometimes one simple advice can start a positive domino of effects into really growing the business in so many areas.
All right, so I saw you're a solutions architect, US strategist, product designer. How did you get to where you are today? Like, first off, I saw you're a fashion model. Like, where was the transition there? Were you more interested in fashion and then you were interested in technology and you decided like, okay, let's look somewhere else?
That's a good question. Well, I think I would start by saying, I've always liked to work, and I started working very young. I started working very young. I think most people are now working at 11, 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
So that's when I started modeling. And then I had the opportunity to travel everywhere around the world. I lived in over 4 continents. And I knew how to code and develop because mostly on the front end. I had the opportunity to have a few people in my family that knew how to do it. And then I always wanted to learn, so I tried to self-learn, be self-taught. And with that experience, I started my own business as a UI developer. Yeah, okay. So I started networking, and it started with knowing a few brands that are fashion customers that needed a website and so on. And when I saw I was doing a lot of work for that. It was at a time where we were just transitioning from physical business cards into real websites. So business was really busy with that. And then I really got involved and wanted to learn more about the back end of things and how to build applications from a back end standpoint. And then I enrolled into General Assembly, and then I stumbled into consulting a while after that.
Okay. How did you learn front end developing in the first place? Did you self-taught that yourself? Was that in high school or middle school or anything like that?
So I did a lot of my school remote because I was traveling. And so yes, it was while I was in school. But I think it started with me really liking to blog when I was very young. And, that was just very common amongst me and my friends. And then I wanted to develop templates. And then I wanted to learn how HTML worked and CSS. And then one thing led to another. And then I wanted to do animation. So I learned JavaScript and then Photoshop. And so, that's how I developed those skills. I've always been very good into finding out information about what I want to learn. And going back to the question that you asked, I think college degrees have always been very important. And for a very long time, the only way that you can get into a professional career. And I'm a very big believer that in self-education and going after ways of learning. I really think that the best education you can get is by exposure and putting yourself into the most experiences as you can. Really getting yourself into situations where you have to figure it out and then go from there. And then that would really be a good experience, I would say.
Okay. So I was wondering, what is your advice for those who did not go to college but still want to go to tech? Because it looks like you were taking a more like the entrepreneurial route, that you went to go take it out with your own hands. But for those who, what were the other alternatives out there? I know you did the coding bootcamp with General Assembly.
Yeah.
Were you weighing out other options as well? And how did you choose the bootcamp specifically?
For me, it was a very easy decision.
Okay.
I saw it, I got to learn about it. And then as soon as I saw everything that it was involved in the course, the syllabus, I decided to enroll. I thought that's exactly what I want to learn. This is exciting. So it wasn't much of a decision that I looked around too much. It was just, I get interested in something and I want to do it. It's kind of like that. And in terms of advice, I think that one, certainly look for ways that you can learn. We have so much information nowadays, and so much of it is free or cheaper than it had to be one day. And then second, just be uncomfortable and then become comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that's always an advice that I try to give myself as well.
Yeah. And that's actually like an advice that everyone gives in consulting, because like literally you're thrown into uncomfortable situations in the first place.
Absolutely. All of the time. I don't know if we're ever going to be comfortable. And many people don't know that, especially, junior consultants that are starting. They might feel like they don't know what they're doing or so on. We all experience that. And I think just don't be afraid of stepping outside of your comfort zone. Reaching out for help and leveraging, other folks and associates that could help you learn and aid, and then gain experience, really put yourself out there.
All right. So after the bootcamp, how did you get to becoming a solutions architect, a UX strategist, or product designer, or even consultant? Like, what was your path from there?
Yeah, so I got a call from a recruiter to join consulting
Okay.
as a solutions consultant back then, so not an architect at that point. And I decided to take on the opportunity because it's funny when I received the call and she was telling me about what it entitled to be a consultant. I really liked everything that I heard. I liked the problem solving. I liked that, I was doing business and technology at the same time. My parents are small business owners, so I've learned a lot about business when I was very young. And, I remember they're working on their CRMs and all of that was very outdated back in the day. But, I felt like if it just fit everything that I wanted to do, business, technology, problem solving, customer facing. So I worked as a solution consultant for a while, and then, just another opportunity showed itself after it. And then I became an architect after having a lot of experience in the field, and knowing how to really build solutions from a design standpoint as well, as technology, and knowing how to code it.
What does a solutions architect actually do? I hear many different people say different things. So I'm kind of curious about your side of how it's like on a day-to-day.
Yeah, I can certainly answer for what I do. So I design solutions from an architecture standpoint. What does that mean? It means that whenever a customer has a problem or it needs a solution for something, or needs to design a workflow, I define pretty much how that's going to look like from an information architecture standpoint, from a design standpoint, UI visually, and also from a process standpoint. So sometimes I would work with a business process consultant to aid on those decisions. Pretty much most of the time, I would also have TCs that would be taking on some of the development work. So I'll help them figure it out, how to reach that solution. What is the best approach from a technical standpoint. And then also, I would be heavily involved with agile methodologies as well. So it's very in alignment with product development, what I do. But of course, there is so many professionals, and different industries would have a different explanation for what that role would entitle.
Yeah. How much exposure do you have to sales? Because at least I know the solutions architect I know at Accenture, they're very hand in hand with sales team because they represent the delivery side.
Got it. Yeah. So we have a set of architects that would work on the pre-sale side of things. And, I'm always available if I need to jump on and help with some of that part. But I'm mostly involved on delivery. So that's really what I focus on. It's very much, product driven. And when I say product, we are talking about services and solutions, and really delivering, something that will aid and add value to the customer.
Okay. And right now you're specializing in ServiceNow.
I'm specializing ServiceNow right now.
Okay. So just to kind of put it into perspective, is it that the clients go to you, they know they want ServiceNow at this point, and it's just really like the design aspect, or they don't even know what they want and ServiceNow is the solution, that's where you come in?
Yeah, both. So some of them would come, already knowing what they want. And it's up to us to determine that, is this really how you want to go? Because those are the recommendations that we have. And this is what we've seen work and not work. And then, letting them know how to go from there and what's the best roadmap for their path. And sometimes we have to be the expertise to advise them on going to ServiceNow. I've worked with a lot of customers that have integrated with different tools such as Workday and so on. ServiceNow is a place where you can build workflows for automating tasks at work. So there are just so many use cases. And, sometimes you are just really trying to enhance, for example, your HR processes or your IT processes, and then you can build applications to help that.
Okay, so I was curious about this in terms of how much did your coding bootcamp actually play into what you're doing today? Either what you did before or what you learned in the coding bootcamp?
I think a lot, and not all of it at the same time, I think every educational experience that you are going to expose yourself to is going to dramatically change your understanding of things. Mm-hmm. So of course, I think, really helped me understand more from an application side of things and not just designer mentality. Also understand, the entire process of product development.
Yep.
And how to deliver a product, how are the best strategies for coming and delivering something that will really entice your users from a mm-hmm. user-centered design perspective. Those are all new concepts to me the first time that I learned them. Mm-hmm. But that said, again, I've had just so much exposure to different experiences and different things that I've done in my life that I think everything contributes to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as a solutions architect right now, do you do much coding?
I do.
Okay.
There are actually smaller projects, sometimes I will be the main point of contact for both architecture and technical implementation.
Okay.
So I sometimes still build things from the ground up. Actually been working on a very cool application that I did a lot of the coding for it. It's a locker integration. So it's something similar to like Amazon lockers where you deliver things.
Wow.
So something to automate the procurement process. So pretty cool. And then there are other projects where I really just build the recommendations on how to go from there. The story is if I was working in agile methodology environment and then as well as the approaches from a technical standpoint, and then I'll hand that off to a developer.
Okay. All right. I think it sounds pretty similar, at least from the way you're saying it, to functional consulting. Are you familiar with what a functional consultant does?
What is that?
So it's actually what I do with Workday. I gather the customer requirements. I build a lot of the logical flows. So it seemed pretty similar with you saying automating the workflow. That's what I also do as well. So yeah, I think it seems, but I don't code. That's the thing. And because Workday is almost like a no-code environment, you just build a lot of if statements, a lot of logical flows. And then there is a coding compartment of it. So that is not really something that is mostly necessary. It's really like if it's in scope to customize a lot of what we have. But from what I'm seeing, we do get a lot more involved with the client, specifically in the design stage. And then we're helping them along with the testing, like here's some test scripts you can use. And then they go through it and we're kind of like their TAs and some sort of like telling them, oh, how do you do this? Okay, we'll teach you how to do it. And then it's really like a handoff at that point.
I think that's certainly similar, but yeah, I think it really aids for you to have that understanding from an architecture standpoint so that you can really understand how things integrate and how what's the feasibility of something, because many times you're not going to have the developer on those decisions or on those calls, and you need to understand what's possible and what's not, how much effort things will take, and also just a general understanding of, based on everything that I have implemented in the past and based on all of the best practices, what would work and what would not for this customer. And then because I do have the user experience background, I like to use that as well into my recommendations. And, I do a lot of prototyping work. And I think every architect would have their own approach. But for me, that really helps. Because, I can show the customer how their portals, for example, their service portals will look like before they make those decisions. And then we can even, conduct A/B testing or so on.
Okay. So for anyone who's interested in becoming a solutions architect, I guess like you could probably answer for specifically ServiceNow solutions architects. What would you say are important skills, experiences, or even particular traits that you would look for if you were to hire for this role?
I think first and foremost, as a solution architect and consultant, you need to understand that you are a consultant. So I would say that the main skill that you need to have is one, being able to communicate, two, being able to solve problems, and then three, being able to handle challenging situations. And then from a solutions architecture standpoint, the more technical understanding that you have from different platforms and different applications, the more you're going to be able to contribute into the architecture of that solution that you're working on. I think personally, I am a person that I am half very methodological and organized and precise, and another half of me is very intuitive and very creative and very intuition driven. So I do think that that's something that has helped me get to where I am as a consultant, and probably why I've landed this specific role. And I think you really need to look at the data, but at the same time, you have to look at what emotions can you create for your users and what can you deliver from, a psychological standpoint. Because if you look at COVID-19, for example, this is an example of something that if you were to look at the predictions and so on, we were not necessarily sure that this was going to happen. And, you can try to predict everything that you want, but look at how much this has had an impact in the world and how businesses are operating. And so you need to also be able to, have that intuitive part and, take it in consideration, the emotions that people have, fear, greed, all of those aspects really play into consideration when developing a user experience.
Thank you so much. So I did have a question about moving on. What are your short and long-term career goals? Do you think you're going to still stay with ServiceNow? Do you think you'd still want to stay with consulting or a little bit more on the design aspect?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. I think that I want to make the most impact as I can into the most organizations that I can. That's probably my long and short-term goals. There are many initiatives that I would like to be involved in, but I think what I have been interested in mostly in the moment is actually expanding my focus of work into other technology platforms, and perhaps expanding the niche of expertise that I have. I have been very interested in leadership and even psychology. So using some of that and perhaps even, growing the practice at my current firm in that direction and really focusing and keeping on pushing the user experience approach.
Okay. So coming from a modeling perspective, I feel like this is where it gets a little bit interesting because you not only came from a non-traditional career path, but you're also coming in as a woman. So as a woman in technology, consulting, how was your experience? Because I mean, like up to you on how comfortable you're talking about it, but if there's any particular roadblocks that you had, how did you face it? Did you have any sticky situations? I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I think that as a woman in technology for over 10 years, I would say, there are two things that I can probably say in regard to that. I think first one, there's definitely a challenge for us as women. We are still trying to find, more space into leadership and really opportunities in technology. And, that's not news, as well as facing, the unconscious bias and all of that. It's definitely challenging. But what I would also like to point out that I'm very happy to see is that I do think there are a lot of initiatives going on in regards to that. I see a lot of companies really making an effort to improve on that area. And, people like yourself having podcasts and creating a voice for women, that's just something that I think we're really in the right path.
Thank you. So you mentioned biases and conscious bias specifically. So what were some of the biases and stereotypes you had to face? Is there something that you had to deal with? I know like a lot of people feel imposter syndrome because they're like, oh, I'm not like them because, women are like this. So,
definitely. I think that having imposter syndrome, I guess, who doesn't go through that in their careers, right? I mean, I'm nervous making this interview. So I think we're always, I think we're always trying to make sure that we are delivering and showing off our best selves. And whenever we stop to think about that, we get a little, self-conscious. So I think it's really comes back to what I was saying about getting more exposure and really putting yourself out there. And then the more you do it, the more natural it probably will become.
So I guess that lends a hand into the next topic, which is what advice do you have for women, for people who want to get into STEM or consulting?
I think especially for women in technology and in all professional areas, the more we build our confidence, like there's just so many confident women around. There's something that would specifically apply to women that I want to talk about.
So what is on the horizon for you in 2021? I know the year is almost over, which is kind of crazy, but do you have any particular plans wrapping it up or even for the next year?
Just keeping busy. Companies are automating like never, and really trying to get on that digital transformation, especially since COVID started. And so I have been busier than ever, really have my foot on the gas. So just keep on working.
Okay. Actually, that I did have a follow-up question on that. So how have you seen your job change during the pandemic? Did you see any particular, like maybe a lot of clients now want to go into ServiceNow, or they want to do a lot of more digital transformation, or maybe like a lifestyle change on your end?
So first one, I think that we've been having more customers than ever. Whoever was not working already on their digital transformation now is, because they have a lot of customers working remotely, or, at least going back to remote and then on site. So you really need to have that automation and those processes in a way that you can work from anywhere. And then for me personally, things haven't changed much on the being remote side. I've been remote for quite a while. The only thing that has changed for me is that I'm not traveling as often. So I used to have a lot of in-person workshops and so on. And now everything is really online. And I guess video too. A lot of, because we are trying to recreate the experience of being at work, but being at home. So video really plays a big role into that. And before everybody was working from home, most of my calls would be just on the phone or so on, even though I was working remotely, or on the Zoom without video. So that's definitely something that I've been seeing changing, and I think for the good.
Okay. So before you were working, like, can you give me a percentage of how much was remote and how much you were traveling on a typical day or week or even month?
Yeah, I think I was working from home about probably 60% of the time, and then the rest traveling. It always has been something that I would be able to change if I wanted to travel more or less. But I think there was always a good balance of, being on the workshops, but also coming back home and having the time to have the analysis of how to go from there in a project sense and come up with the solutions for the customer.
Yeah, that's pretty much similar to my end. I think a lot of people who think about consulting, they think like, ooh, it's 100%. But for me, it wasn't. It was probably like once a month, I would be there only for 3 to 4 days. So probably even less than 40%. I would probably even say 10% if anything. So a lot of that was already remote. And then the only difference after the pandemic has started was just like, I just didn't have that 3 days of travel I did every month. But I like it now, but I also prefer to be on person, because for those workshops, I like whiteboard. I can't do this remotely. It's so hard.
Have you tried to use those digital whiteboards? I know some people use their iPads for drawing. It's not the same, but it's what I try to apply to make up for it. But I totally get you. I definitely miss the on-sites as well.
Yeah, I think like our sessions are mostly, we go on Excel or Word document or OneNote, whatever, and we kind of imitate as if it is, but one person's the one doing it. That whoever's on the call would be saying like, oh, I would do that. And then the note taker would be the one who does it. But it's not like an interactive process where everyone's coming in.
Yeah, and then I think also, at least for me, what I really liked about going in person to companies is that I would have the chance to sit with multiple departments in a day and, just go from door to door. And even if I didn't have a meeting with marketing to understand more about their branding, because UI is also important to my projects, I would find a way of talking to them. And now with Zoom, you have to make sure that, you have the time available, you get everybody available at the same time. And we are all just having, so many meetings a day. It's hard to coordinate all of that.
Yeah, I feel like I had maybe like 10 calls over one thing that could have been controlled over just one
I
day, because I'll
know.
just go to like their little offices, little cubicles, whatever, and then I get it done. But now I have to do 10 calls to get each of these little
Yeah.
groups.
And you see, that's user experience. That's
Yeah.
your experience that's going, to that place. And that's one of the reasons why I really liked in person as well,
Yeah.
because you are able to more easily understand the culture. You step in food and everything that you see on the walls, and you understand the culture about the company in a way that you might take longer on the phone to be able to.
Yeah, definitely. So to wrap up, where can we find you on social media?
I think certainly on LinkedIn, and then I am on Instagram, I am on Twitter, and Clubhouse. So, yeah.
Okay. And how can we support you? Are you working on anything specific? Maybe like a little side hustle outside, or if there's anything like maybe we could just follow you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think I'm certainly trying to be more active online and participate in as many advocating for women as much as I can as well. So I want to help. So however I can help and, be parts of those conversations, that's really what I'm looking for.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And really excited to hear a little bit more about what our viewers would think about a solutions architect, because I feel like it's not a role that we've interviewed on the podcast, but hopefully we'll have more on the podcast to get a little bit more flavor of that role.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.